All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to this fantastic series that we're doing today with Jim Donahue on blending artificial intelligence with human insight for maximum impact. And we're specifically talking quite a bit on the marketing, market intel, and strategy side for all those different leaders that are out there. And I think as we get the conversation started and building off of what we've spoken about in some of the prior episodes. Today is really talking about how do you artificial intelligence is changing things, but really asking that tough question is it always for the better? And I think there are certainly cases where it is, and certainly cases that maybe it's not. So it should be an interesting topic. Now let's kind of just jump right in, right? So what we're gonna do today is dive into the both sides of that story, and hear from, as I mentioned, Jim, who's truly been an industry leader and seen where there's been big successes and maybe where there's some things that have crashed and burned. So, Jim, what's been your experience? Is it the technology? Is it how you use it? Maybe enlighten us, but based on your experiences in the field.
Yeah, Gabe, I would say that in my experience, and most of my experience, by the way, is with what I would call more traditional marketing techniques. You know, getting out, talking to customers, understanding their needs, and then trying to translate that into basically, basically bringing that back into the organization so that the organization can then act upon it and develop new products that meet those customer needs. But, I would say that what AI is really giving us today is kind of supplementing those traditional techniques and really giving us the tools to do some of the heavy lifting that, quite frankly, was really a challenge for in days past. What I think we all have to be very cognizant of, though, is really blending the two, using AI to do that heavy lifting, but then blending it with some of the more traditional techniques, like speaking with customers, getting out, doing that legwork, getting out and talking to customers, and really blending the two for the best possible outcome.
Absolutely. And Jim, I'm just curious, any specific examples that you had seen in your tenure of those pieces coming together, maybe just drawing upon some of the recent years that you had with GE Vernova?
Yeah, well, as we've mentioned in prior podcasts, I'm retired from GE Vernova, but I would say that their current campaign is really, that GE Vernova has going on right now, the energy of change, is a great example of that. It is blending the AI element and understanding a global audience, but also pulling in kind of those, tugging at the heartstrings, if you will, of the customers and even the broader audience to really blend the two. But so have AI help to identify those audiences, but then really use the human element to craft the story that really resonates and is meaningful to that audience.
Right. Right. No, that's a great example, and I think that specifically in this realm of sort of personalization, right, is where there's a great impact in terms of marketing tools that artificial intelligence has brought to the table. And given that we said we would also share some examples, though, of where this story doesn't always end as smoothly as you talked about in the GE Vernova campaigns. I think I was asked to share one of those today, and I can tell a funny one where basically I was leveraging one of these rideshare applications, right? Like the Lyfts and the Ubers of the world. Was in a bit of a rush, needed to get to the airport in New Jersey, actually, but I was in New York, and the recommendation engine had prompted me based on my, I think, location and also past preferences, book the ride from your current location to, Terminal 3. And at the end of the day, the artificial intelligence was basically making a good recommendation based on, again, location and behavioral data. I, as the user, actually accepted that, didn't read the details closely, only to later realize, as we were en route, that this was taking me to Terminal C of JFK Airport and not New Jersey, Newark, where I really needed to go, right? So I think the point is that the capabilities are there, but it still is really important to have, human oversight, right? In this case, we truly can't blame the AI. You can maybe blame the human, right? But Jim, I'm just curious for your perspective on this, and how much you still see the relevance and importance of the human in the loop.
Yeah, so Gabe, I go a little back a little ways to, GE Vernova has a gas turbine, a combined cycle product called the HA gas
Hmm.
turbine, and it's very, very successful. And the legwork that went into that when we were first, we kind of had a vision for that product. I personally spent a ton of time visiting customers globally, getting across the table from them with my colleagues in product management, talking to the customers, talking to their engineering teams, talking to their commercial teams, understanding what they wanted with the intent of bringing that all back into the business. The interesting thing about it is you would talk to one customer, maybe a customer in Europe, and then the next day you'd talk to another customer in a different country, and he would tell you almost the exact opposite. What he needed in a product would almost be the exact opposite of what you had heard the day before. And I think that what we had to do, basically that human element had to kind of go back after we had gathered all the data and kind of rationalize that. And then, quite frankly, talk to our engineering teams and our product management teams to say, okay, we've got these two conflicting needs or wants, if you will, from our customers. How do we rationalize that? And a lot of it comes down to what's the market size for one customer, what versus the market size for another customer, what's the likelihood that this one's going to purchase or that one's going to purchase. And I'm not sure that AI really is geared up for that kind of evaluation and that kind of analysis.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of very interesting points there. So first of all, I think Jim, in terms of what I'm seeing in the marketplace, obviously the biggest buzzword right now is really around AI agents, right? That are able to kind of take actions and really be integrated in part of the workflows. I think what I have observed is there's been some fantastic breakthroughs in terms of, let's say, content creative development, right? Being able to say, hey, we want to launch a new, there's a public reference case I've seen from a CPG company about, hey, we're launching a new ketchup product. We want to come up with a marketing campaign based on certain parameters. And basically the agents and the artificial intelligence can come up with some of that zero draft and kind of creative brainstorming on what that campaign ultimately looks like. Where I think if you look at the process that I've seen in terms of the workflow, though, there is a very clear handoff from the agent to the regional or local marketer when it comes to how are we going to run and execute this campaign, say in the United States versus Germany or versus China, based on consumer preferences and their orientation towards different food ingredients and also regulations in those particular markets. So I think this is a good parallel to what you said, where it becomes very important to have the human in the loop for those types of decisions across the overall process. The other point that you hit upon very nicely there is just, again, the overall importance of the foundational data to make AI systems successful, right? It sounds like a bad movie, the old saying, kind of garbage in, garbage out. But I think the real leaders and the real winners that we're seeing in the space right now are the ones that are investing to have a very flexible and strong architecture to ingest different data and have good quality measures in place so that their AI systems are more and more successful.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I think that AI is a fantastic tool to do the heavy lifting, to do the data analysis, to do the trend spotting, to do all of that. That I won't call it grunt work necessarily, but that heavy lifting. But then you need, in my opinion, you need that human element to kind of take that next step, take that information, and use it to craft a story, to craft something that's going to resonate with your customers or whatever audience you're trying to reach. And that's really kind of the blending of those two, in my opinion, is where the magic really happens.
Absolutely. And Jim, I think just maybe one parting question before we wrap up today for the audience. Any recommendations from your side, just as you speak to different marketers or strategists, any 3 or 5 steps that you would recommend to them based on your experience of how to kind of level up in their organizations right now?
Yeah, I think that first we've got to learn the basics. Really,
Hmm.
learn the basics of of your industry, your customers, the macroeconomic factors that are occurring in the world. Really understand those basics. But then get hands-on with the data and the dashboards and really try to understand how those trends and how that information is really translated into hard data. And then kind of combine the two of those, combine that information and that insight to really start crafting stories, practice crafting those stories that are really going to resonate with whatever audience you're trying to reach.
Fantastic, Jim, and couldn't agree more. I think just as a closing note, we can never overlook or talk enough about that importance of the storytelling, right? So the data and the insights take us so far, but again, so important for leaders to be able to sort of tell and communicate what that means to the business for success. I think that's the difference between the leaders and the laggards. So with that, thanks again for joining me today, and I look forward to the next one.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Take care.